What's going on, everybody? It's Morgan J. Ingram here, host of the SDR Chronicles. And as you guys know, the SDR Chronicles brings you motivational tactics, tips, and advice for your sales development career and also for your sales professional career and also your entrepreneurial career, as I believe that sales development is the center point and mantra of your life and really what you can use to flourish your career moving forward. And as you guys know, I stopped at 100, but I'm bringing it back. This is episode 101, and I'm bringing the one and only John Barrows. And I mean, he really doesn't really need too much of an introduction, but as you guys know, as they call him, a legendary sales trainer in some of the speaking engagements that he has. But work with him now. Definitely considering him a friend as we continue to build our relationship and continue to talk about the things that we need to accomplish. Before that, he was doing a lot of stuff with VP of Sales with the startup, and also was with a couple of people doing sales training as well. So he really was out there just getting it and grinding. So really excited to have you on here today, John. And what we're going to talk about is what John really wants to do with all his sales training is sales done right. And we're going to talk about what that mindset is, some themes to really understand as we're kind of getting into the new year here, and also how is this going to be applicable for you moving into the new year, and what are things you need to be looking out for? So without any further ado, John, introduce yourself a little bit and why are you excited about this topic?
Cool. Thanks, Morgan. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you having me on here. And I'm psyched to kind of reintroduce the SDR Chronicles because for those of you who don't know me, I've been doing sales for about 21 years now, been in the training game, and I do social selling. That's part of the training that we bring out there. And Morgan hit my radar probably about, I don't want to say about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago with the SDR Chronicles, right? Like you were pumping these things out and I was paying attention to them and I was like, all right, this is cool. I like what this kid's putting out there. And then, I saw after you got promoted and you put another video out there about kind of your morals and your principles, if you will, that's what resonated. And so it's funny because now that we're together, it's like, you really personify, if you will, what I train and now we train of brand building and how to leverage socials. So for those of you out there that think social selling is a joke and brand building is a joke, just take a look at my boy Morgan here and see what he's done with his career in a very, very short period of time and where he's going, because he's definitely going to skip a few steps. So pay attention.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, it's been crazy because, as I started in this role, I've definitely seen the benefits of building that personal brand and getting a lot of opportunities, and things are coming my way because of that. And I think it's really cool when you have that tandem of building a brand and you're selling and you're also using the tactics that John has. It really creates a really awesome dynamic. And what I want to talk about, because I think a lot of people, as they're going into 2018, they're wondering, how can I be better at sales, or is sales for me? Why do you believe that sales is the best profession in the world?
Well, it's funny, right? Because I always say sales is the greatest profession in the world when done right. It's the worst when done wrong.
Right.
And I'm going to say, people ask me all the time, what's your favorite sales movie and all that stuff. And everybody always says Glengarry Glen Ross, Boiler Room, or Wolf of Wall Street, whatever. And I'm going to straight up say those are the worst sales movies I've ever seen in my life, right? They're great movies. They're interesting movies, but they're terrible sales movies because they're everything that's wrong about selling. Right? It's like they're trying to convince people to do things that they don't want to do. They're just trying to get commission checks just to get paid, right? But when sales is done right, it's the best profession in the world because, first of all, nothing happens if it isn't sold, right? Like you could have the best product or service in the world, but if it can't be sold, it doesn't matter. I mean, the number one, I've dealt with a ton of startups and small businesses, and I got some friends who start companies all the time. And, the number one reason they all fail is because they can't sell it. And so a couple of reasons. One is it makes the economy, it makes the world go round. Sales makes the world go round. Second is I think it provides a really interesting career that allows for a lot more freedom than most careers do. Like sales is one of those professions where the harder you work, the more you get paid, or the better you are, the more you get paid, where most other jobs, you get your salary, you might get a bonus, then you get your little merit raise at the end of the year, 2%, 3%, whatever it is. And some people are cut out for that. Some people are cut out, hey, let me just go and do my 9 to 5 thing, go home and do, and live that lifestyle.
Exactly.
But for those people who are driven and want to get more and be better and just excel in their lives and their careers, sales, I think, presents an incredible opportunity for that. And the last thing I'll say to this is I'm worried. So I got a 7-year-old daughter, right? You know her, Charlotte. She actually,
Yeah.
I erased her drawing of you on my whiteboard.
Oh, the pie.
Sorry, man, the pie face thing.
If y'all remember the pie when I got pied, you know,
So
yeah.
she's all about you, by the way. She's like, Morgan, what's up? Every time she sees like a video of you on there. But anyways, I got a 7-year-old daughter, and I'm real worried about where we are going in the future as far as, you know, it's just unknown. Okay.
Yeah.
And if we tie that to what's happening with technology, I think there's a lot of different technologies that are coming out there, artificial intelligence and those type of things that are going to start erasing jobs, erasing industries. And I don't know which ones those are. I don't know how fast it's going to come, but it's going to come. And so if you're somebody who goes into a certain industry and you know, you get your job and your career there, or whatever it is, and you get into that industry and all of a sudden technology disrupts it, now you're kind of screwed. Now you have to go and say, okay, now I have to go get another skill set. I have to go re-educate myself. Whereas in sales, you could be selling something in one industry. If that industry gets completely disrupted by technology, it's like, all right, let me just go over to this industry and I can start selling here. So I think it's what makes the world go round. It really provides a financial freedom and the opportunity for you to drive your own success. And it gives you a lot more flexibility moving into the future. So you're not stuck in a situation that you're going to have a hard time getting out of. That's why I think sales is the greatest profession in the world.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense, because when you really look at it, sales is something you can use all around everywhere. It doesn't matter. When you look at professional sports, you can only play that for a certain amount of time. When you look at certain other careers, you can only do it. Maybe a lawyer, like there's a certain point where you reach that height and there's no longer you can go when you get that partner level. So there's certain things, marketing, even the same level. There's certain jobs that they have a cap to some degree. And I do feel like sales does not have a cap, but you also have to understand that you have to continuously be learning. Just because you're in sales does not mean that you're going to be successful.
No, God, no. No, actually, I heard some stats a little while ago that said that 3 out of 4 people that get into sales every single year get out because it's that tough of a job, right?
Wow.
They think that, oh, all I got to do is get in, you know, I'm good with people, right? So all I got to do is get in and talk to people.
So all I got to do is talk.
Right. And talk to people. And then, you know, and then I get to go play golf and make a whole bunch of money. And then they get into it and they get punched in the face 99 out of 100 times. And they got to keep coming back asking for more. You got to be a sick, twisted individual to like coming back for more of this pain. But for those of us that do and realize that, you know, through that pain, you learn and you get better and you get better. And you know, that one win out of those 99 gives you that satisfaction. I always kind of say, like, sales is like golf, right? You can't shoot a 0 in golf. Yeah. It's the same thing with sales. Like, you can't be perfect in sales. You can always get better. Right. So, and I think that mindset's an important one.
And so how does one develop that mindset? I think for like SDRs or listing sales professionals, even leaders that maybe start coasting, right? And they're like, yeah, I understand what to do. Like, John, I'm good. Like, what's your message to them?
You're going to get passed up fast if you have that mentality, right? If you really think that you can't get better, then I'm worried for you, because I think in the not so distant future, somebody's going to just, again, either a technology or a individual is going to come and just you. But I think the way to do it is just to be very focused, and you're great at this, is like goal setting and also just focusing on continuous improvement. And there was a book I read a while back called Raving Fans by Ken Blanchard. Have you read that one?
Yeah, I have. It's a good book.
Yeah, I love Ken Blanchard stuff. See, I like Ken Blanchard stuff because it's nice short books with big words. And you read all the complicated ones. But for me, like, you know, because he talks about know who you are, know who your audience wants, you know, what your audience wants. But then the third pillar there of his whole approach is the rule of 1%. Which is and the way I translate that is set the bar at a high but attainable level, right? So it's like, okay, I want to get to this level of my career, whatever.
Right.
And then once you hit that bar, don't throw it up another like mountaintop to climb. Just try to do 1% better every single day. And so what I try to do is, between goal setting and that mentality, I try to look at myself at the end of every day and say, hey, am I better today than I was yesterday? Just 1% better. Right. And that could be, did I make one more cold call? Did I send one more email? Did I read, you know, an extra blog post or something like that? Like, whatever that is, did I do 1% better today? And then, because if you do the math, right? Like, if I told you in 50 days, you got to be 50% better than you are today. Like, you'd look at me sideways and be like, John, man, I'm working my ass off right now. Like,
crazy.
Are you kidding me, right? Like, that's crazy. But if I said, Morgan, can you be 1% better than you are today, tomorrow? Yeah, I could do that. Right. Yeah. So 50 days later, guess what? So I think that mentality of goal setting, and something that you did, I remember you told me that you sat down with some friends recently and kind of mapped out your personal goals for 2000, right?
Yeah.
That's another part of it, right? Holding each other accountable for it and being like, hey, what's up? Like, this is what I'm trying to do, right? And telling other people about it so that they keep coming back to you and saying, hey, have you reached that goal yet? Have you reached that goal yet? So I think those are some key factors in making sure you stay on top of getting better every day.
Yeah, and I think that's really huge. And I think because people don't want that accountability to say, hey, these are my goals, and then have other people say like, hey, like, let's do it together. And like, if you fail, like, I'm calling you out.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. But let's kind of move on to the next thing though. Like you're talking about learning every single day, moving forward, getting 1% better. But if you don't do that, right, because people are going to ignore that, you're going to become a robot. So talk about how that's going to be happening soon.
Well, I mean, I think if you just start going through the motions, right? I mean, I think that's the problem, that a lot of people just go through the motions. They make their calls, they send their emails, or, I'm talking specific sales, but this is rampant across every industry. You might, again, I think whether you turn into a robot or not, I don't know. You might get replaced by robots, but I think you turn into just somebody who's, again, just going through the motions. And when that happens, we've talked a lot about artificial intelligence, where we see the industry going and all that other stuff. The more research I do on artificial intelligence, the more I realize that what it's really going to do is it's going to make good sales reps great sales reps incredible, and average sales reps irrelevant. And so those average sales reps, the ones that are just cranking out template emails through Cadence or whatever, the ones who are making generic cold calls, asking BANT questions, pressing demos, all that stuff, those are the ones that are going to get replaced, because that's all the mundane shit that robots can do and technology can do. And I think we gotta keep asking ourselves these days, what can I do that a computer can't? Because if a computer can do it, you got to start asking yourself, how much longer are they going to pay me to do this, right?
So talk about a little bit more stuff about, like, what are some things that we should be looking at?
In what? Like, in what regard?
Just as, like, to not be a robot. Like, what are some things to set yourself up apart? I mean, obviously there's personal branding, but there's definitely more than that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, there's a lot, right? I think the overarching thing that I would really encourage people to pay attention to, and this is something that I got from Gary Vee, and you heard me say this before, the whole context content thing. Yeah. He said, everybody talks about content is king, content is king. He said, okay, fine. If content is king, then context is God. And to me, that translates to sales and marketing, right? Marketing is content, sales is context. If we as sales reps aren't putting any context around our content, then we're no better than marketing or no different than marketing. And I don't understand why we're getting paid to do what we do. Yeah. So I would really encourage reps to understand, and I'm going to be very tactical as it relates to sales reps specifically, right? I get the fact that we have to send out a bunch of emails because our managers are asking us to 50 dials or whatever, 100 activities a day. That frustrates me, but I understand it.
Yeah.
And there's a time and a place for that. SMB, when you have, 10,000 accounts in your territory, then yeah, you can't be personalized on everything. But if you have a territory that's a mix of, like, really good accounts, like tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 accounts, then mix it up a little bit, right? For your tier 3s and maybe even your tier 2s, be targeted with your approach, but you don't have to be personal on every single one of them. But at least learn, like what we're doing, the process of, that you're going through right now, as far as learning the personas of the people that we're reaching out to.
Yeah.
Care about, and then carving up our message to relate to them. And then for those top tier accounts, those are the ones that you actually put some time and effort into. And it doesn't have to be a lot. I mean, we've talked about this. I do 5 accounts once a month. Every day I drink my coffee and I check out my data feeds for my top 25 accounts, something like that. I might only send 3 or 4 really high quality emails out every day.
Right.
But that keeps first of all, it keeps my brain moving, right? Because if I'm just going like this with a robot, like, okay, like, first of all, not only my results probably suck, but my job satisfaction's got to be through the floor. You know what I mean?
It's because you're just like pressing buttons, and you're just like, I'm coming here to press buttons, and you're almost like a conveyor belt. And you're just like,
well, and what happened to the conveyor belt? Like, let's talk about manufacturing, right?
Right.
When the manufacturing industry, when the U.S. moved into the manufacturing world, right? And all of a sudden, all these people are like punching holes and doing widgets, right? Like, that was a very repetitive task. And guess what? Technology came around and just annihilated that industry. I mean, look Detroit's still trying to recover. There's industries, there's parts of this country that are still trying to recover from what technology has done to the manufacturing industry. You fast forward 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that might be the exact same thing. You know what's scary? Somebody said that Detroit, I heard this, that Detroit used to be like it. When I say, like right now, like San Francisco's it, what I mean? Like, everybody's like, ooh, San Francisco, look all the like cool shit that's going on over there, right? Well, apparently back in the day, when Ford and all those others were really grinding,
like pumping it out,
Detroit was the place to be. Like, that's where all the celebrities wanted to go.
That's crazy.
Can you think of Detroit being like the hippest, hottest spot in the US to go to, like where all the ballers went and everything like that? Can you imagine that at this point?
No, I can't even see that whatsoever. The only reason that most people even know where that's even at is because they might watch 8 Mile or something from Eminem.
Right. Exactly. But even 8 Mile, I mean, I'm not old enough to remember, like I think my dad might be old enough to remember when Detroit was hot, right?
Yeah.
But and there's the same potential that could happen in San Francisco. You know what I mean? Like, we could be in 20, 30, 40 years looking back and San Francisco's this, oh yeah, you know why? Because some other part of the world, forget about the country, some other part of the world popped off with this new whatever because we weren't paying attention. And so, that's really where I think we just need to pay attention to the trends. You don't have to, I was all freaked out about artificial intelligence a while ago. I was like, oh man, we're all dead. Like,
yeah, I remember that.
Right. But then I've learned that, yeah, it's there. And I need to make sure I'm paying attention to what's happening. So again, tactical stuff that the audience can do, like stuff like Feedly, sign up for a Feedly account and set up some, follow people in artificial intelligence and whatever trends that you want to be following. Virtual reality is another one that I'm going crazy about. So I think, you need to pay attention and you need to keep asking yourselves, what can you do that a computer can't? To at least be honest with yourself, to say, all right, yeah, I am kind of going through the motions here. And you know what, there is a possibility that I could get replaced. But right now I'm going to keep doing it because I got a plan, hopefully. But I think you just got to keep paying attention.
Yeah, no, John is right here, guys. Like, you guys have to continuously pay attention. There's so many things that are changing on a daily basis that I'm even like, whoa, okay, like that's coming and like this is coming. And I think I read an article, it was like China, they started replacing their workers with robots. I don't know what the percentage was, but it's actually starting to become a thing. And a lot of people are leaving China because of that. So be on the lookout of this. It's very serious. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, like, so one of the things that we're working on, talk to them about like the voice stuff, right?
Yeah. So a cool thing that John and I and the team talked about is Alexa voice. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Alexa Dot or Alexa Echo, but essentially what happens is that it gives you a briefing for whatever you want to go over. So it can be ESPN, it can be NBA, it can be Gary Vaynerchuk, like Lewis Howes is on there, podcasts, and they give you just a brief overview of like, hey, like this is what I think for the day. So that's something that I'm actually going to dive into in the new year, do some more investigation, and I'm really excited for that because I know that voice is going to be big, and you got to get ahead of that at the end of the day.
I mean, I think Gary's a great person to follow. There's another, like, I'm assuming all your audience follows Gary Vee at this point. Yeah. But for those of you who don't, you should, because he's actually a way that I try to stay on top of trends, because he stands on top of all these trends, and then I pay attention to what he's talking about, and I'm like, all right, well, how relevant is that to sales or whatever? But I'm a big believer that the Alexa thing, we're all going to have personal assistants sitting there at our phone. So instead of like Nudge or any of these tools that tell us all the information that we need to know before we go into a meeting, the Charlie apps, those type of things, instead of it being text driven in my inbox, maybe in my calendar invite, I think it's going to be, hey, Alexa, I'm about to call into, Morgan Ingram over at JBarrows. What should I know about Morgan? And Alexa's going to be like, well, Morgan, he started the SDR Chronicles. He just got promoted to da-da-da-da. And these are the things he likes. And his most recent tweet was da-da-da-da. And it's like, okay, cool, thanks. And then I'll make a phone call to Morgan and be like, hey, Morgan, what's up? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so if we can start to at least be in the position to at least be there if that starts to pop and be one of those voices that comes through, like, dude, I'm all in.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit more about, because we talked about this earlier, the tactics of that persona reaching out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Well, there's the tailored approach, and then the fully tailored approach, and then the targeted approach. And the
Right.
targeted approach, and this is how you get volume, right? And I think it all comes back to just knowing your audience and knowing what they care about. I always talk about, how, CIOs, right? Okay, CIOs, I kind of get what they do, whatever, but there's most companies do a persona profile of a CIO about here's what they care about, whatever. But you dive a little bit deeper into that and you understand what is a CIO, like CIOs in the healthcare industry have different priorities than CIOs in the
Right.
manufacturing industry, right? And
Completely
also CIOs in 2018 have different priorities than CIOs did in 2017. So the more I understand about that, the more I can speak the language of the person that I'm reaching out to. And I'm not going to pretend like look, I'm not ever going to pretend like I'm going to be a CIO, right? Or I know what a CIO does on a day-to-day basis. I didn't go to school for
I know
that.
everything about you, so this is why I'm reaching out. It's like, whoa, don't do that.
Yeah, and don't pretend, right? Because, if you've ever gone toe-to-toe with a CIO and pretended like you knew what you were talking about, especially tech, like they will annihilate you, right? And
Yeah,
you'll lose credibility by pretending to be something you're not.
exactly.
But if you know enough to ask educated questions or to come up with messaging that resonates and shows that, hey, this kid at least knows my world a little bit,
Right.
you gain credibility and you gain the opportunity to have a better conversation, right? So I'll give you a quick example. I've always been a priority-based seller my entire life. I've always believed that if I cannot tie my solution to one or two of the top priorities that you as an organization have, then good luck selling anything, right? But the way that I used to get there was by simply asking the very generic question or statement, tell me about your priorities. And if I look back on that, I would get answers, but they would be very vague answers. It'd be like,
Right.
oh, revenue. Like, oh, great. So let me show you how it can impact your revenue.
All right, let me tell you.
Right. But so now instead of that, I'm like, hey, you know what? Instead of telling me about your priorities, I go in and say, hey, thanks for taking the time here. I had a few quick questions. Typically we're dealing with CIOs in the healthcare industry, and they're telling us that in 2018, their top priorities and initiatives are X, Y, and Z. Are those yours by any chance? Even if they're not, the fact that you showed that you kind of had a little bit of insight into where their, kind of what their direction is, tends to open up the door a little bit more. And the last point I'll make is, here's an example, and I got a challenge for everybody who's listening to this right now. Ask yourself, do you know the difference between a CTO and a CIO?
Most people don't. I figured it out in that training the other day.
Yeah, right. And I mean, you saw it in that training I asked, right? And maybe like 2 hands went up, and these were like senior sales reps who were in that room.
Yeah.
And so if you don't, for instance, if you start talking CTO stuff, like asking CTO type questions to a CIO, you're immediately going to lose credibility in that conversation. So you at least have to know. And for those of you out there, Google it. What's the difference between a CIO and a CTO?
Everyone's like, all right, like, what are you saying, John?
Right. Generally though, CTOs are focused externally, CIOs are focused internally. So CIOs are focused on the internal, like the systems that the company uses to hit their goals. And then the CTO is more focused on the product and what they're bringing to market. So that's the fundamental difference, but go do some research on that one.
Yep. No, he's right. And that's kind of just a tactic there that I will start to be using, just understanding personas. I feel like I've learned more by taking deep dive in personas, and I feel like the calls that I have now, I'm having better conversations because I know what the pain points are, and I can point to priorities and like, okay, I know why you said this because I know one of your priorities is this, and they appreciate that I've at least done the research on that, even though I may not have been in their shoes. They appreciate it.
Well, what'd you realize? Let's walk them through like the real quick, like when you're at Dreamforce, right? Like you realize that enablement, VPs of enablement were my main audience, right? Yeah, we got VPs of sales and that type of thing, but ultimately in the bigger companies, VPs of enablement are the ones that, so what'd you end up doing? Like how'd you educate yourself on VPs of enablement?
Yeah. So one thing that I did, and actually just recently I'm doing this with SDR managers and director of sales development. I just posted a LinkedIn question. I was like, hey guys, I'm really curious to know more about sales enablement. The reason for this is because I moved into a new role and I want to get as much insight as possible. And I got a lot of feedback and I got a lot of comments. And I had a lot of people reach out and had great conversations. Same thing I did at Dreamforce. Instead of, trying to sell people like, oh, like close now. Like, it's like, no, I'm not doing that. I just wanted to know what people's pain points were, not to understand how can I provide a solution? It may lead to that, but I wanted to know like what are people actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and what are the trends? And so that's something I'm really focused on is what are the trends problems that people have in those positions, because they do actually coincide, whether you believe that or not.
Absolutely, love it, man.
Definitely. And I think that's also going into the next part. I think what we need to talk about for sure is what is the future of sales development? I know you mentioned this before. I know the SDRs are reporting into marketing now. SDRs are, actually getting more involved in customer success route, which I feel like is really cool. Just give me your highlights on where do you think this sales development career is going?
Yeah, I do. So I do think sales development is going to be interesting. I do think it's starting to become its own department. Well, it's obviously its own department, but it used to be a feeder system to the ultimate sales role, which is AE, enterprise, whatever. But now I think more and more there's going to be the development of SDRs, SDR management, SDR directors, SDR VPs. And I think a lot of that is going to start, instead of going in the sales route, I think it's going to start continuing to move under marketing and operations. Because I do believe it's more, with all the tools and technologies and artificial intelligence and all that other stuff, my vision for SDRs moving forward is it's kind of like that old school switchboard operator, right? Where they plug something out and plug it in. And so I think that what's going to happen is there's going to be all this messaging out there from marketing or whatever. There's going to be these tools, and then there's going to be the cadence, if you will. And what that cadence is, I don't know. Is it going to be email, call, social, tag, something, whatever? I don't know. But that's what the SDR is going to be there. So they're going to sit down and say, okay, with account-based marketing and all these other things, I'm going after this account now, and it's going to be a VP of sales in the SaaS industry, and it's for a high growth company that just had a merger and acquisition. So let me go find my VP of sales SaaS industry messaging. Let me find my merger and acquisition messaging, and let me put that into a cadence and figure out, what's the best approach to use to go after that person. And so I do believe it's going to continually be more of a like split testing, trying different things out, more operational focused. And driving that conversation. Now the question is where, the sales rep, the fully rounded sales rep, where that's going to come from, right? Because when I was growing up in sales, we didn't have that breakdown. We didn't have the predictable revenue model where it was inside, then outside, then field, right?
Right, and that's been scaling up as of late, so that makes sense.
Well, that's been, predictable. Salesforce came out and they broke down those roles, and that was fantastic for companies that wanted to scale sales, right? Because now everybody was specialized, and you could bring people through. Whereas before, it's like you did everything, and you either sank or swim depending on how good.
Yeah, it's like good luck.
But the problem with that model is it's not customer centric in any way, shape, or form, right? No customer likes to have some kid call them, say something very minimal, right? Ask a few bant questions.
Yeah.
Say, okay, that's kind of interesting. I'd like to dive. Oh, well, now I have to send you over to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. Make that flip. And then that person usually asks the AE usually asks the same damn questions as the SDR did. And so now it's not a good customer experience, right? Same thing with customer success. So I think there's going to be I think the SDR AE model is going to have to evolve. So I think it's going to be more team-based approach where it's going to be inside sales and field sales and marketing all together in a pod. And then the SDR is going to be a piece of that. So, but it's going to be more under the marketing side of the house than anything else.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with you. And I believe the future of sales development is actually going to be towards the theme of, what this entire episode is about, is sales done right. I think it's going to lead people down the right path. It's going to allow younger people like myself to have the opportunities that, I had, maybe could be completely different, but it's going to give some people some great experience in tech as this industry continues to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's I think it's I'm starting to notice, what was it, Outbound or whatever it is, or 10 Bounds. There's now conferences specifically for SDRs. You didn't see that 2 years ago, right? You're starting to see very specific focus on that. So again, paying attention to trends, that's something I would absolutely pay attention to is where is the SDR role evolving to?
Yeah. And definitely, as you guys continue to listen to this content, like express yourself and say like where you think the future sales development is going. Like don't leave it to people who may have a ton of experience or maybe considered thought leaders to express those opinions. Like you have opinions, you're in the role. Go ahead and say what is on your mind so people can receive that feedback and we can continue to grow the sales development community.
Yeah, I'll add one more piece to this just to because you've heard me say this before. My number one is somebody asked me, John, if you could go back and tell your 22-year-old self something, what would it be? And my number one answer to that was A/B split test. A/B split test everything. And I think that's probably my biggest recommendation for those SDRs out there trying to figure out like, hey, where's my value? I'm probably not enjoying this too much because I am going through the motions, pushing buttons, whatever. We'll split test, A/B split test everything, because then A, it becomes interesting. B, you start to figure out what works a lot faster, right? So now you take, you're going after CIOs in the healthcare industry, come up with 2 different messages to CIOs in the healthcare industry, make 20 phone calls with this, make 20 phone calls with that, or send 20 emails with this and 20 emails with that, and really be focused. So that going back to what we talked about, being 1% better, that type of stuff. If you say you make 50 dials in a day and you get 0 meetings, right? That's a terrible day, right?
That is a bad day.
Yeah, trust me, I've been there. But if you make 50 dials and you make 25 dials with this approach and 25 dials with this approach, and you still get no meetings, that's actually not a bad day, because you just figured out 2 approaches that don't work.
Never work.
So now, like, you start to hone in on stuff, because that's always going to change too. Like, as it evolves, like that message that you used 3 months ago is probably not going to work again because something, marketing got a hold of it or whatever it is. So
right.
You gotta keep iterating, keep getting better, and split testing is the way to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And, John, as we kind of wrap this up, A/B testing, messaging, Feedly, you mentioned, what are some tools that people can be using right now to enhance their sales process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the more you have information come to you, the easier it's going to be, right? I mean, we could talk all day long about, the technologies out there that you have to go spend money on. And by the way, for those of you out there who are waiting for your company to invest in certain technologies to make you better and just complaining about it, I'm going to tell you right now, the extra $50 a month you might spend on one of those technologies to make you that much more efficient is going to be worth it in spades. So don't be shy about pulling out your own credit card and putting it on and saying, you know what, I need Sales Loft. I need some type of tool like this to make me better. And then have your manager come to you after you're crushing your results and be like, what's going on? Why are you doing so well? Be like, well, I spend $50 out of my own pocket a month for this tool because it makes me that much more efficient. Then all of a sudden the company will invest in it. But so I think there's a lot of those type of technologies, but the free ones, Owler, I think Owler is a huge one. Those are those that do alerts and stuff like that. Feedly is a huge one for me. And then just anything that can give you information. Because I think the hard thing right now is anytime I have to go do something, like go search for something, go look for something, it takes an extra level of energy or effort or thought for me to segment that out and say, okay, let me go do that now. But if I can have the information come to me and alert me when certain things are happening, or, going back to that Alexa example, here's an example, like
it's huge.
Motivational quote of the day, you know what I mean? Where it's like every day it's reminding you to do something, or, making sure that I read that blog every single morning, or, whatever it is, A, create a routine, B, try to find those tools to have information come to you so that you're not always going out and doing it, because then it becomes this event. But if you can create a routine around it, then it becomes part of that routine and you stay consistent with it and stay up to date on it. So
that's it, guys. Have a routine and you can do sales right. That's it. That's really it. Well, John, thank you so much for coming back to the relaunch of the SDR Chronicles video series. One final question that I ask every single person that comes on the show. What is your number one piece of advice for an SDR as they go into their new role?
I mean, outside of the split testing, which I said, I think it's key to have a plan. And I mean that in a life plan. I used to laugh at the question of like, where do you want to be in 5 years? Right. And I would just go, oh, whatever, and I want to be a manager. Right. And I used to laugh at it, but now I actually think it's a very important question to ask. Now that I'm in my 40s, it's important, but I think looking back on it, I would probably ask my 22-year-old self to start looking at this a little bit more seriously. Whereas like, look 5 years out and say, forget about job wise. Think about, where do you want to be in your life? Like what kind of lifestyle do you want to be living? Right? Do you want to be a baller and be making tons of money and be taking vacations? Do you want to have a good family? Do you want to be, work-life balance? Whatever that lifestyle is. First, lifestyle, right? And then based on that lifestyle, ask yourself, okay, well, what kind of money do I need to make to be able to live that lifestyle?
Right.
Therefore, what kind of job do I need to get to be able to help me make the money to live that lifestyle? And then you can back into it as far as what you need to do to get that job or that, right? So now, because I always say, look, the SDR role, I've always said is the hardest job in sales.
Hard. So hard.
It's the hardest job in sales for so many different reasons. A, it's a grind. B, you're dealing with AEs who all have different personalities. C, like what kind of value do you bring to the table? That sort of thing. But the problem is a lot of reps, they tend to, oh, this job sucks, right? So, or the leads are weak or whatever it is. And so they bounce from one SDR job to the next one because the grass is greener, right?
Yeah.
And so they'll go over there and then they'll realize it's the same thing, right? It's just, yeah, it might be a little bit easier up front, but then it's going to be just as hard.
Yeah.
And so they bounce from job to job to job. Now, those are people that don't have a plan. Okay. Because what they're just looking for is they're year to year, they're looking for how much money can I make this year? I don't like my job today. But if you put out 5 years and that stake in the ground and you say, okay, what do I need to do to get there? Look, I'll eat a shit sandwich for a year if I need to, if it's going to help me get to where I need to be.
Yeah.
So
I actually want to talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
So a lot of people know my story for the most part, but don't exactly know why I actually took the SDR role. So I was interviewing with a ton of tech companies in Atlanta. And the thing is, I was at a complete disadvantage because this was my first job I was trying to get. I was getting into the tech scene, which normally people are looking for a lot of experience. And with sales, I had no previous quota carrying role. So I'm a very risky person. And my resume is high flight, like, because I do things within a year or two and then I'm like on to the next one. So, but I knew that the SDR role was something I had to get involved with because it was something that like I had to kind of like eat it for a year. Yep. Because that role is not very glamorous. Nobody's giving you high fives. Nobody's rolling out the red carpet when you set an opportunity. Yeah, your team is, but not the rest of the organization. And so, yeah, but I knew what I wanted to do and I knew where I wanted to go. So I knew if I do this SDR role for a year, if I put everything, my heart and soul to it, I know I can make it into something that's can be awesome and can give me an opportunity in what I'm in right now. So yeah, my message is the same as John. Like, if you know you could sit in a role for a year and you had a crystal ball showing you what you could be in 5 years, if you did that year of just like taking the crap, like you would do it.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely.
I think everyone needs to have that perspective when they're looking for jobs and not just looking for the money. Because I think that's where people go wrong. It's like, is the grass greener on the other side? It's no, the grass is greener where you make it greener.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that, I mean, if there's a book, I know you're into books, like the Think and Grow Rich, right? If anybody's out there,
that's a fantastic book. Yeah, but be forewarning, be prepared. It's gonna mentally warp you. So,
yeah. but ultimately it's about goal setting, right?
Yeah.
It's about like the most successful people in the world set big, huge, hairy goals, and then they go for them, and they don't let anything get in their way. And if you have that mentality of that, okay, 5 years out, this is what I want to do, and you drive towards that, all your decisions become a lot easier. Like, what you can tolerate becomes a lot easier because you're like, no, I'm doing this for a reason. You know, I'm doing it because it's a piece of the bigger puzzle here. But if it's just you're doing it, then yeah, you're going to bounce. You're going to go from job to job, and you're going to have a hard time finding something that you're going to love because you're going to do it by accident, if nothing else.
Yeah. It's all perspective, guys.
Yep.
But yeah, John, thank you once again so much for coming on the SDR Chronicles. As I always say, guys, keep dialing, and I'll see you guys soon.
All right, make it happen. Thanks, Morgan.